And now on to Chicago style. So the third style we've learned today, and as I mentioned before in class, this is the style that's most used for classes in history, Bible, and occasionally some humanities instructors will use it as well. With MLA, if you recall, we had a works cited page, and with APA we had a references page. For Chicago style, you have a bibliography. And I'll tell you right off the bat that students often forget that you need a bibliography at the end of Chicago style. And I'll explain why as we go through this presentation. But please remember that you do need a bibliography at the end of Chicago style. You're going to find that this style is very different from MLA and APA, and that is because instead of in-text citations, you have footnotes. So that's a big change. I kind of like footnotes because it means you don't have to interrupt what you're saying with the parentheses. Instead, you have just this tiny little number that indicates a footnote. So it's a lot easier to read Chicago style, I think. All right, so let's look at how to do this. Here are your rules, and again, I recommend taking notes for sure. When using material from an outside source, such as an article, book, or interview, etc., you need to include the following. At the end of the sentence, insert a footnote. A little number will appear. Then type in the appropriate documentation information in the footnote. This may appear at the bottom of the page or at the end of the document before the bibliography page. So you really have an option in Chicago style whether to do a footnote, which will appear on that particular page, or an endnote, which will appear at the very end of the paper. I'm going to highly recommend that you use the footnote because if you use endnotes, that means that you put those endnotes at the very end of your paper, and that's what makes students forget the bibliography, because you need both endnotes and a bibliography. So if you do footnotes, it's much more likely that you will remember the bibliography page. So that's what I would recommend. But if your professor ever requires Chicago style, you will want to ask him or her about what they prefer, footnotes or endnotes. And as I said, you need a bibliography page at the end, arranged alphabetically according to the author's last name, and giving the complete publication information of the source. So step one is insert your footnote. So here's our article that we've been using all along. And you're going to go to Insert, Reference, Footnote. Now, of course, this is going to be different for every version of Word that you have. But when you insert that footnote, you'll see this little number 1 appear at the end of your quote. Okay, that means you're doing it correctly. What will also appear is a little number 1 at the end of the page, like this. Okay, so then in the little number 1 at the end of the page is where you insert the footnote information. Of course, you must use your Hacker manual to figure out how to format this appropriately. So you see you've got all this information. This is a lot more than we would usually include in an in-text citation in MLA or APA style. But you can do that because you have all this space at the bottom of the page. So you're going to include a lot more information. So that's the footnote portion. I'm going to show you how to do that on an actual document in a little bit. This is a sample page so that you can see kind of what it looks like. They put this little line at the bottom of the page, and then you can see the little footnote down there. Okay? And here's the benefit. If you use a Bible quote, which you're totally welcome to do for this paper, the footnote is really straightforward and simple. So feel free to do that, which is nice. And then finally, please don't forget your bibliography. Now, the bibliography page looks like it has the same information as the footnote, but if you look carefully, they're formatted a little differently, and it's important to include both. So please don't forget the bibliography page of your essay. Another benefit to using the Bible is that if you look in your Hacker manual, you will see under Sacred Text that it says sacred texts actually do not need to be included on the bibliography page. So, if you use a quote from the Bible, you only need to include the footnote. You don't need the bibliography. So that is the one exception to the rule that I've said this entire video. That's the one time that you don't need a bibliography page, is if you use a sacred text. Okay, so as promised, I just want to show you on a Word document how to insert a footnote. So I've selected Ben Hackett's essay, which is one of the example essays that I've placed for you on Blackboard. It's a really beautiful essay, and I recommend checking it out. So Ben included a paraphrased quote from Napoleon for his source. He says, when Napoleon Bonaparte said that imagination ruled the world, he was not just being poetic or capricious. Beautiful start to an essay. So we need a citation here to indicate that this imagination ruled the world idea comes from Napoleon. So what we would do is we'd go up to the insert menu and insert a footnote. Again, your menu might look different depending on what kind of version of Word you have, but look for this insert footnote option somewhere. So when I click insert footnote, it gives me some options. It asks if I want footnotes or endnotes. Again, I'm recommending footnotes. Yes, I want them to appear at the bottom of the page, not the end of the document. And I want number format. I want them to start with 1, 2, 3, etc. Start at 1, great. And so I'm going to click insert. Magic happens. You can see up here it added our little number 1, and it also automatically brought your cursor down here for the footnote. So now I'll enter the information using my Chicago style guidelines, and I'm done. And I can bring my cursor back up here to start typing the essay. So what I want you to see here is you do not need to go into the footer and do all kinds of strange things. You need to just click insert footnote. What's neat is, let's say I wanted to do a footnote later on. If I go to insert footnote, keep all my settings the same and click insert, now automatically it knows to make it number 2. So that's kind of cool. That's what you want in Chicago style, okay? If you have trouble finding how to insert a footnote in your paper, please remember you have a help screen here. If you type in footnote, it will tell you how to do it. Okay, so use your help screen. It's your job to figure out how to appropriately insert footnotes using Chicago style, regardless of what version of Word you have. So please don't do any funky formatting with this. Really figure out how to insert a footnote properly so that this nice little line appears and you have the numbers that happen automatically. All right, thanks. So happy Chicago styling on your papers, and if you have any questions, as always, feel free to email.